Hello everybody, this is Brett Lonsdale from Lightning Tools and welcome to another webinar. This week we're going to be looking at the Lightning Forms product, which is a product that we launched in September last year and is used to customize SharePoint list and libraries inside SharePoint Online and also SharePoint on premises. So we're going to jump into that in just a moment. Before we do, I just want to introduce the company to those of you who are new to Lightning Tools. I'll introduce myself and then we'll dive straight into Lightning Forms. I have just a handful of slides, so the majority of this webinar is going to be a demonstration around customer relationship management. So we built a customer relationship management solution inside of SharePoint on premises in this example. So welcome to the webinar. Again, in case you're new to Lightning Tools, so Lightning Tools is a company that provides many different products around Microsoft SharePoint. My background is as a trainer and developer, so I used to teach a lot of C# and SQL courses and things like that back in the day. When I was delivering classes around SharePoint, there was many people that came to our classes that were requesting features or were disappointed that certain features didn't exist in SharePoint, and that led us to build Lightning Tools and start filling some of those gaps that exist in the product. So Lightning Tools, we started off around the external data side of things. So back in 2007 when we were formed, we created a tool called BDC MetaMan, and that allowed us to build external content types or application definition files, as they were called then, to make it a lot easier for bringing external data into SharePoint. So we did that for SharePoint 2007. That's evolved all the way up to SharePoint Online and SharePoint 2016 that we have today. And around that area, we also have a couple of products around data visualization, such as our data viewer and also our charting tool as well. So you can take external data and apply conditional formatting, grouping, and things like that to it, as well as building powerful charts. And these are tools that are aimed primarily at the SharePoint power users, so they can build dashboards and so on around that external data. We also have tools for connecting to SAP as well, with business connectivity services, and some other products that are not related to data, but things around permissions for one, so we can report on permissions, we can manage permissions in bulk, and this is a tool that's not just focused on IT being able to provide that functionality, but also site owners and site collection admins, anybody that might have full control to any object inside of SharePoint. And if you're interested in seeing that tool, we ran a webinar a couple of weeks ago. That webinar is up on the website, so you can go to lightningtools.com, click onto webcasts, and you'll be able to see some of the previous webinars and some of our other products as well. We've also got a content aggregation tool, so you can perform a SharePoint content rollup. This allows you to aggregate across site collections, build powerful views, again, without writing code. It's something that power users are able to achieve. And we've been doing that for about 10 years in SharePoint on premises. And we've had the product available for SharePoint Online as well for over 4 years now. So that's in the SharePoint App Store. So if you want to do a cross-site collection rollup in SharePoint Online, then our Lightning Conductor tool will certainly be able to do that for you. There's another couple of products, so discussion forums. We have a discussion forum tool called Social Squared, and obviously we have the list forms editor, which is what we're going to be taking a look at today. And any of our customers that are on here that do use business connectivity services or use the content rollup tool, use the Lightning Conductor, the Lightning Forms product works really well with those as well. So you can actually customize existing external lists. So that makes a lot of sense. If you're writing back to external databases, we don't want to do a round trip to find that we've broken some form of data integrity at the data store level. So what we can do is trap errors with some of the validation controls and so on, add some logic through Lightning Forms on BCS external lists, as well as SharePoint lists and libraries as well. And when it comes to the content rollup, well, those of you that have used the Lightning Conductor, when you go to open up an item that has been aggregated, rather than just seeing the plain SharePoint list view to view that item and edit that item from within the Lightning Conductor, you actually get to see the customized form and all the logic that you've designed using Lightning Forms. Okay, so that's a quick intro to the products and what we offer. The company, as I just mentioned, we were founded back in 2007 by myself and also a former colleague, Nick Swan. We're a UK-based company. We have a US office in Orlando, Florida. This time of year, much better to be there. And we're also certified for code quality by an organization called Rencore. So Rencore have a product that allows you as perhaps SharePoint administrators or SharePoint tenant owners to analyze code before you go and put it inside your SharePoint environment. So you can take any third-party product or even a product that you've developed internally, throw at it a WSP or throw an add-in at it, and it will analyze that code for quality for things like memory leaks and any bad practices as well. So we've been using that tool ever since it existed, and it's to ISO standards, and we've been very proud to be certified and the first company to be certified in the SharePoint space for our products reaching that code quality. Okay, so a little bit about me. So my name is Brett Lonsdale. As I mentioned, there's a number of things I do besides SharePoint in Lightning Tools. I also do a lot of SharePoint stuff for the community. Basically, I'm a SharePoint geek. So there's books that I've written on things like business connectivity services. I'm the one of the hosts of the former SharePoint pod show, now another pod show, and organizer or previous organizer of SharePoint Saturday UK, and also a number of other events here that we have in the UK as well. So that's a bit about me. The agenda for today, we're first of all going to have a quick look at some of the different pain points that some of our customers using Lightning Forms experience. So we can just share why people come and use the product, and hopefully it might be that you're experiencing some of those same issues. We'll have a look at what is Lightning Forms, some of the different features that it has, what it's going to bring to the table for you, and then we're going to have a demonstration of a solution that I've been building for you this week. So we'll go through that, and I'll be demoing in SharePoint 2016, but bear in mind this is also available for SharePoint Online as well as SharePoint 2013 and SharePoint 2016. So it's the same product that you can use in both of those environments. So even if you have a hybrid environment, you can customize your lists and your libraries using the one solution. At the very end of the webinar, I'm going to open up for questions. So if you do have any questions, obviously on a GoToWebinar, everybody's muted by default. So what I'd like you to do is raise your hand if you have a question. So whilst I'm talking, if you want to take a moment, find that button. You should find the raise your hand button inside the GoToWebinar. Once you click that, I'll unmute you. So don't click it by accident, because if you're in the middle of cooking or something, I'll be able to hear what's going on. So yeah, if you do have a question, raise your hand, I'll unmute you, and you can ask your question. If you also don't feel comfortable asking a question in front of an audience, please feel free to email me. I will give my email details at the end of the webinar, and other contact details, so you can get in touch. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the common pain points that you may experience. So one of the things out of the box SharePoint lists, basically a SharePoint list contains three different forms that we're going to talk about. First of all, there's the new form, there's the edit form, and there's the display form. So it doesn't matter what type of SharePoint list or library you create, you're going to come across these different forms. And there's a bit of a screenshot here, or we'll have a look at one inside my SharePoint environment in a moment. But generally, that is the layout. You get a long list of columns, and this is just the out-of-the-box contact list that you can see inside the slide here. And already you can see that based on the screenshot, we'd have to scroll up and down in order to get to each of those fields. And there's plenty of white space to the right of those fields. So one of the things we might want to do is just simply rearrange the layout. We can certainly stretch the fields to 2 columns or more. We can have different tabs to hide some of the complexity. So when we go in there, there's some fields that maybe we don't necessarily want to see. I think there's fax number, for example, in there, as well as maybe address details. So we don't necessarily need to see the address details of all of our contacts. Primarily, we might want to see company name, first name, last name, as well as phone number and things like that. So we could have different tabs that hide some of that complexity. So we could have personal details on one tab, we could have address details on another, and so on, and start to rearrange the way the form looks. Now, as well as just the look of it, we can also add logic. Now, obviously, inside a SharePoint list, you can go inside your columns that you've created. You can add some calculations in there as well. You can do this relatively pain-free in SharePoint, but there are a couple of things that do require a bit of pain. So one of them is if you wanted to add any form of like conditional formatting. So if somebody puts in a value in a field and you want to change the color of that field based on the value that they input, we can do that type of thing. We can also show and hide fields based on values that are previously set. So if you just think of, I think everybody on the call has at some point ordered something off of the internet, unless my dad's on the call or something, he wouldn't have. But so what we can do is go onto a page. We can choose the type of credit card that we want to use, whether it's Amex, whether it's Visa, MasterCard, and so on. And we would get different types of validation based on the type of card that you chose. It might obviously ask for a 4-digit code if we're using Amex, or a 3-digit code if we're using Visa, and so on. So we can show and hide different fields. We could change the validation controls also based on input from the user, and that allows us to add different logic as the fields get filled out on the form. So that's really one pain point, is we can't add that kind of logic using SharePoint out of the box. Now, obviously, you could use something like InfoPath, and we'll come on to that in just a moment. Another weakness of SharePoint is the sort of Masterdetail scenario. Those of you that have built relational databases or even dabbled with something like Microsoft Access in the past, you may have worked with relationships. So you've got one-to-many joins between different tables. So we could, for example, have a customers table, and related to that customers table is an orders table. We do that because we don't want to repeat. If this was flat, we don't want to repeat the customer information for every single order that a customer might make. So we have a one-to-many join, which allows us to build or create the customer details just once, and then we can build the order information, add order records many times. So that one-to-many type join isn't really possible inside of SharePoint. You have lookup columns, so we can have a detail list that looks up from a master list. So for example, in this scenario that I'm going to be showing you, we can go and create an order from a customer, and I can actually look up the customer name. But that requires the user inputting the information to first of all go to the customers list and then navigate away from that and go into the orders list. And if they want to log a call, they have to go into the call list, and so on. And therefore they're losing the sort of context of the item. It'd be much better. We've got plenty of space that we can use. Why don't we have the customer information that we need at the top, and then we can have repeated lists or sublists, as we call them, on the same form. So literally we do see the customer information and the orders and the phone calls that we make to those customers all on the same page. That way the user's just filling out the one form. So same sort of thing with like an expense claim. So if we're doing an expense claim, we might want to put in the date of our expense report, who our manager is, who we are, and so on. And then we start listing the items. We don't ever just have one expense. If we go on a business trip, we're going to have flights, we're going to have food, we're going to have drink, we're going to have hotel accommodation, and so on. And we're going to have multiple receipts that we need to input. So it's much better to do that on a single page than it is to have to go to two different places. So some form editors also require programmer knowledge. We don't. So what we can do is go and build expressions. They are JavaScript based, but you don't need to know JavaScript. If you can do expressions in Microsoft Excel, adding two columns together and that sort of thing, you'll get along fine with Lightning Forms. And I'll show you how we can perform some of those expressions to build calculations as we go through. And again, it's very context sensitive. So what we can do is modify a form. We can test for existing values that are inside the fields without having to do that in a separate tool or on a separate page. We're working with the list as you're building out these calculations. So another obviously big pain point is the fact that Microsoft InfoPath has been deprecated. Now, this still seems like fairly recent news to me. So time's flying in the SharePoint world, but it was back in 2014 that announcement was made that come 2023, InfoPath will be no more. But already, Microsoft are not adding new features to InfoPath, so it's going to, if not already, become very out of date. And we're nearly halfway through that time period already. So anybody looking to build new solutions, any sort of business critical form-based solutions inside your SharePoint environments, it would be a difficult decision to warrant using InfoPath now to build that. We might be building something for the next 6 months, and have just in a few years that functionality not be available anymore. So we certainly don't want to have to build any business critical forms around that. You've got to consider that you're going to have a lot of data collected using those forms, and you have to migrate all of that data to something else. Likewise for access services, that's another tool that has been used to build solutions inside of SharePoint, and already that is being deprecated. It's back in June last year, you couldn't build new solutions based on access services. Come April 2018, you won't even be able to use them anymore. So you keep that in mind. If you're using access services, you may want to look at building something pretty quickly inside your SharePoint environment that replaces that functionality. And then, of course, there's PowerApps. So PowerApps is available in Office 365, not yet for SharePoint on-prem. You can access external data through PowerApps, so you can build forms around that using the data connectivity options. You can even use PowerApps for accessing external data that might be on-prem. If anybody is in the UK, by the way, on Tuesday next week, there is a PowerApps UK Community Day, so it's a free to attend event, so feel free to register for that. Just Google UK Community Day, you're going to come across the details for it. But PowerApps is still a little bit more focused towards mobile devices, so we're looking at building forms that are on mobile devices, which is great. It's also out of context from SharePoint. So building forms, you're not actually within inside the SharePoint environment whilst you're building them, and therefore you can't do things like testing the logic and so on as you go. And the forms still look very basic, but it's an evolving product. So hopefully soon, we may have some of the features that you would expect. But I wouldn't yet call it an InfoPath replacement. It doesn't yet work with SharePoint libraries as another weakness, and so on. So these are the kind of pain points that users are experiencing. So let's have a look at Lightning Forms and what it brings to the table. So Lightning Forms, first of all, it's very contextual. You are designing and working with your forms actually within inside SharePoint. So you can take your power users, for example, they can go into maybe a task list or a contact list or a custom list or even a document library, and they can start customizing the forms using a WYSIWYG editor. So they can basically drag and drop fields to design the layout, add calculations and so on, and hit save and test it straight away. They're not having to go from one environment to the next. So it's fully integrated. You'll see all the options in the SharePoint ribbon and so on. It also, for that reason, offers the application lifecycle management. So if you do make a change and that change breaks or something, or you're not happy with it, just like a document inside a document library, we're tracking the version history. So you can revert back to a previously saved version and put it back to how it was. Make that the latest version again. So there's full application lifecycle management. You can also export all your design changes, back them up. You can import those design changes into another identical list and so on. Okay, so some of the different features, I'm not going to reel through all of these. We're just going to use this as a reference slide as we go through and demonstrate some of the features. So we're going to start off just having a look at the layout. So let's have a look at the layout of an existing solution without customized or any customized forms, and we'll look at how we can change the layout, insert sublists and tabs and things like that, and then we're going to move on and start to work with some of the different logic features, so behaviors that we can perform inside each of the different fields. We'll have a look at things like validation. We'll add some buttons with actions to do lots of different things, and we'll also look at how we can integrate with things like SharePoint groups to hide fields based on your permissions as a user. So different types of solutions that you can build. You may want to look at obviously building some form of vacation request form or leave request form. There's asset registers, expense reporting, employee onboarding, all sorts of different solutions that you might want to look at performing. What we're going to be looking at is, as I mentioned, some form of CRM tool. So what we have inside the SharePoint environment here is a number of different lists. You'll find, let's go into the main one. In fact, I'm going to open up customers. So I'm just going to navigate to the site contents. And under customers, my customer list here, is just a few items. Before I go in and create an item, I just want to show you some of the different fields that we have. So we've got things like company name, we've got contact name, we have role, which is a choice field, obviously phone, address, country and area, as well as we've got this total order value as well, and email address. So these are the columns that I've created for this list. Now there's also calls and orders. So if we make a call to a customer, obviously when we make that call, we want to be able to perform a lookup to the customer. We don't want to enter all those customer details again. So as we go into the list settings here, you're going to see the company field, and that company field is a lookup to the customer list. So we're simply going, we call it company, we're going to the customers list, and we're providing a lookup of company name, and likewise with the orders. So very simple scenario to understand. If we navigate back to the site contents and go into customers, I'll create a new item. So this is a completely uncustomized list. This is completely out of the box. All we've done is created a custom list with some fields, but I want to show you some of the challenges that you'll be experiencing with an out-of-the-box list. So I'm going to put in a customer name in here. So let's just put in Lightning Tools again, and I'll put myself. I can choose whether this customer or this contact is a decision maker, influencer, or end user, the phone number. So we'll put our UK office phone number in here. We can put in the address. So we are on a field in the middle of nowhere. It's an old granary. So I'll just leave it at that. And then I'm going to choose the country. And here's a problem. So here's a list of countries. So I'm going to scroll down and choose the UK. And then I've got the area. And under the area, we're going to see counties like we have in England, and we're also going to see states like we would have inside the US. Now, it would be obviously great if I didn't have to scroll through all these different states and all these different counties to find what I'm looking for. I'd really like it to filter the area based on the value that I put inside the country. So we're going to do that in one of the examples in the demo. However, in Northamptonshire, so for those of you that are interested, that's pretty much bang in the middle of the country. I've also got the total order value here. I'm just going to ignore that for a moment because we're going to make that a calculated field, and I'm going to put in my email address. So that's brett@lightningtools.com. and hit save. So I've set up the customer, but imagine I've got this customer on the phone. I've entered their customer details, and now I have to go and find the call list. Okay, it's under recent. If it wasn't, I'd have to go to site actions, site contents, and access my call list. But I can go into the call list here, hit new item, and I've got a call reference. We could look at calculating that as well. So I'll just call it call 1. And then I've got the company. So the company is now a lookup. So I can look up Lightning Tools. I could put in my employee details. Okay, I might just put in Brett. I really want that to be calculated. I can put in the time of the call, a description. So this is a follow-up call. And I've got the follow-up date. So when I want to try again, if I reached a gatekeeper or I got voicemail or something like that. So I'm going to put a date in there and hit save. Okay, so whilst they're on the phone, I may also go and create an order, and you can see all this sort of jumping around that I'm having to do between all these different lists. So what I might want to do is go into Lightning Forms, obviously. So a couple of ways of accessing Lightning Forms. I can go into the Lightning Forms add-in. So this is a SharePoint hosted add-in that I can access, and here's the main dashboard. So what this allows me to see is all the different lists and libraries that I've had open up recently. I can just filter out the lists, filter out the libraries, and so on. And if I look at the lists, we've got the new form, the display form, and the edit form on there. And in order to customize one of these lists, I just have to click the relevant icons. If it is the new form that I wanted to customize, I can click the new form icon. That's going to launch the editor for me, so I can begin customizing the new form. And that will also remain bold once it's customized. So when I'm inside the dashboard here, I can see what has been customized and what's standard or out of the box using SharePoint. So that's one way of accessing it. So let's actually just do that. I'll click onto the new form to edit that. Hopefully this will take just a few seconds so I can have a quick drink of water. Okay, so that's launching the editor for me. So again, you can see I'm still inside the SharePoint environment. I'm actually inside the list here, and these are the different fields that are now available for me to begin working with. And first of all, we might just want to get rid of some stuff. So I don't really want to make any attachments, so I'm going to delete that. I may want to move to 2 columns wide or tabs or something, so we can achieve that. Also notice I can also add other web parts, obviously. So if I wanted another web part on here, I could add another web part, and that might be something like our chart web part or our content roller web part or something like that. You could then use web part connections and so on to build quite a powerful scenario. So whilst I'm inside the main web part, the forms web part, you'll notice I've got two ribbons that are specific to Lightning Forms. So under the Rich Forms tab is all of the different things that I can do as far as layout and inserting controls. And then we've also got this Behavior tab where we're working with calculations and different behaviors inside the fields on the form. So on the Rich Forms tab, first of all, the very left-hand side, this is where we can save our changes as we go along. So we can just keep on hitting save periodically. We can do a save and close and save and keep editing and so on, which is all on the drop down there. And this is where we've also got the reset to version. So currently there aren't any other versions. As you'll see as we go along, we'll build up the versions here. So if you wanted to revert back to a previously saved version, you can. We can also reset to default as well if we want to put it back to exactly how it was. Now we've then got the fields drop down, and inside this fields drop down it shows all the different fields that live inside the SharePoint list that this form is based upon. So I can just simply drag and drop the fields from there. Sometimes when you're building a solution from scratch, you might think, okay, there's another field that I could really do with. So rather than having to save and close the editor, excuse me, go back into the list editor and build a new column, you can actually do all of that from here. So I can actually just click add new column and add the column directly into the list without having to go anywhere else. So we've got the dragging and dropping of existing fields. I've got groups and so on that I can work with. So as far as changing the layout, I've got vertical groups, horizontal groups, and also groups with headers. And if anybody comes from a Lotus Notes background, you might remember twisties it used to have. So what we can do is drop on a group with a header, and it gives us a twisty that we can expand and collapse lots of different fields. So again, it's great for hiding complexity or large forms. We can have a number of fields that are all grouped together that are hidden by default, and then you would expand the twisty if you wanted to see all those fields on the form. So basically customizing the form, we can go through and create some of these groups. I can also create tabs. So let's add a couple of tabs on the form. sorry, I double click then. So we've got a tab here, and I can simply go through and give that tab a name. So I might have main customer details as that tab, and then I could go through and add a tab next to it, which is going to be my address details. So simply I can rename that to address, and if I want to start changing the layout, so I'm going to leave things like the company name. Let's just drag that back down there. I accidentally dragged it up. So I can have the company name under the main customer tab, as well as the contact name. They're things that we want to see all the time. We want to see whether they're a decision maker or not, so we can drop that under the main customer tab and so on. But things like the address details and what have you, sorry, let's just choose the address tab. So we can start adding the fields for the address details under the address tab and so on. The other thing we can do with this is insert rich text areas. So under the rich forms ribbon, we've got the ability. Let's first of all insert a group. So I'm going to drop in a vertical group here, and let's just drag that above the tabs. And inside that vertical group, we can insert a rich text box. So I'll just drop that inside the group there. Okay, and inside the rich text box, we can make that as big or as small as we like, and you can go through and start adding headings. You can insert pictures and so on inside that rich text area. So if you had a heading or something like that, that just creates a bit of a better layout. The other thing that we have on the rich forms is the ability to insert sublists. So remember, there's a lookup column to this customers list from both the calls and from the orders. So if I want to show calls on here, we can just simply insert that, and Lightning Forms is aware that there's a join effectively between those two lists. So that just takes a moment to go through and add that as another web part essentially on the page with a connection, allowing us to see that master detail scenario. Okay, and in a moment I'm going to show you what we in England would call a Blue Peter version. If you've never watched Blue Peter before, you're lucky. Blue Peter was something that I grew up with, and there was always, here's one that we did earlier. So yeah, there's our sublist. We can drag and drop that wherever we want it to appear on the form. So that's going to show our child data effectively. So we've got the ability to enter the customer record and then start entering the calls as we perform them, and we can do the same thing again with the orders. So I'm going to jump ahead, save time. I'm sure it'd be quite boring, and you'd all start jumping off the call if I was to try and make that look perfect here. So we're going to go in and have a look at the layout completed. So I'm just going to go into this other subsite, go back into the customers list, and in here, let's first of all just click create new item. Okay, so as you can see, we've got the tabs. So here's the company details tab over on the left-hand side, and I've got the address details. So you can see we're using up less space on the form. We're hiding some of that complexity, and we've also got the two sublists, as well as the rich text area and a graphic, which makes it a bit more appealing to the eye. So if we just put in another company, let's have Combined Knowledge. So Combined Knowledge is a training company in the UK. They have a sister company in the US called Mindshop, do great SharePoint training. So I'm going to put in Zoe Watson in here. She's a decision maker. We'll put in her phone number. It's actually the phone number if you want to order some training, and we'll put in Zoe at combined-knowledge.com. Okay, and we can start making a call. So this is all I've done so far is just change the layout. So there's no logic in here at all yet. I'll put myself in as the employee, the time that I wanted to make that call, or the time that I did make the call, rather. Description. So we'll have this as perhaps a first time call, and I can choose when I want to follow that call up. So we'll just choose tomorrow if we don't get in touch with her today, and so on. So we start to see that information all on the same page. We've got the main customer details there, and all the call history as well as the order history will be on that that same page, just simply by changing the layout. The address details, that problem still exists. So there's the countries, and we are seeing all the areas. So even if we do fill out this correctly, combined knowledge is based just down the road from me here in a town called Lutterworth. So I'm going to go and choose the UK again and choose the area. And even though it's just down the road, it is in a different county, and that county is Leicestershire. So in here somewhere there's Leicestershire. Let's select that and we'll choose save. Okay, so that's just an example having customized some of the layout within inside the form. So what else might we want to do? So another way of accessing the editor is not go into the Lightning Forms app, but you can also, from the ribbon where you navigate into the list, just alongside the Customize an InfoPath form button is the Customize in Lightning Forms button. And in the drop down there, you can see the default new form, the default display form, and the default edit form. So if we go inside the new form, that's another way of launching the editor. Okay, so here we are in the editor again. So we talked through some of the different layout options that we had, things like tabs, and of course we've got tables and groups and what have you. There's also the ability to insert toolbars and buttons, which we'll be having a look at very, very shortly. But there's also some other things that we can do on here, like sometimes we don't want users to be able to enter values, especially if it's going to be a calculated field. We don't want them to be able to overwrite that. So what I can do is just choose this total order value field. Since we're going to calculate that anyway, I'm going to make that only available for display, just simply by ticking that checkbox. So if you're familiar with when you go and open up an item in read mode and you can't actually change the value, obviously that's the same thing it's going to do here. So you can have some fields that are editable and some that aren't on the same new form. We can also just lock the content. So if we do want to display it as an editable field, but just lock the contents, we can also do that. And just simply by dragging and dropping, you can resize, reposition, but you can do the same manually as well. So you can add all your padding, change heights, widths, move things up and move things down, all from the Rich Forms tab here. What we're going to jump to though is the Behavior tab. So on this Behavior tab, we want to go through and add some logic to the form. So one of the things we aren't doing yet is calculating some form of total. So if the customer does place an order, we want to be able to put in the order reference, choose the product, enter the quantity and the unit price, and have it calculate the total. So that total at the moment isn't being calculated. It's just down to us to enter a value in there. So what I can do, you'll notice in here, since I've selected a column inside a sublist, we've got this sublist column section, and in there is the calculated field, so I can enter the calculation, but we have an expression builder. So this makes adding those calculations a lot easier. And like I say, you don't have to write any code. You can simply go through and add your calculation. So what we want to work with is this thing called sublist current row. So this shows me all of the different fields that are available on the main form. So as we expand those, you'll see we've got the original value of the field and a Boolean to say whether or not that field has changed. So if the user is editing the item, we can tell whether they've changed it or not. So we have all of those. So if we wanted to do a calculation on the main form, we could do that easily there. But we've also got this context objects. So this allows me to go and grab things like the user profile information. We'll be looking at that in a moment. We've also got the page variables, basically environment variables, all available to me. Under the sublist current row, that's what we want to work with, because we don't obviously want to calculate across all the rows. It's just the current row. So what I can do is just say I want to take the quantity. So double click that, and we want to multiply that by the unit price. So we'll double click onto the unit price. And you may have noticed there that there was a little bit of validation going on. So let's just accidentally put in a full stop or something like that. Notice how it tells me that that's not acceptable. It's telling me what's wrong as well. So it's not like we're just working with Notepad here. It's actually telling me what's wrong with my calculations, if there are anything or is anything wrong with it. So that's a simple calculation. We can test it. So we don't have to actually save the calculation yet. I can go in and test the calculation, make sure it works. So clicking onto that test button, this is actually going to render my form for me. And as we scroll down, we could start to fill out the fields and test the calculation works. And if it does, great, let's go and save the dialog. So I know it's going to work, so I'm just going to hit save, and that's going to calculate those fields for me. So that's performing that calculation. Now, once we've entered quite a few orders in here, I'd like to be able to total them all up and put in the total order value of this customer. So we can just look at a customer and see what that customer's spend is at any time. So by choosing the total order value field, you'll notice up here we've got the field value. So I can set an initial value for the field as well as a calculated value. So this is going to be a calculated value. So again, I'm going to use that expression builder. And what I'm going to do this time is expand the sublists section, and I've got two sublists on the page. I've got the calls and the orders. So I want to expand orders, and it's the total field that I want to aggregate, basically. So as I expand the total field, there's some aggregate functions that I can use: sum, average, count, min, max. I just want to sum them, so I'm just going to double click onto sum, and that's it. I'm now going to roll up the calculations from the orders into a total field inside the main customer list. So there's a couple of calculations there. Let's just also go through and set the a default field. So I'm going to go into the calculated field for employee. So we'll expand context objects. We'll go to the user, and I'm going to double click onto the login name. Notice I could get the user's email address, or I could get a profile. I can also get or determine if they're a member of a group. So that's going to give us a 1 or a 0 based on whether they're a member of a group or not. Now, where that is really useful is over here under the control status. I can actually enable or disable fields or show and hide fields based on whether the user is a member of a SharePoint group or not. So if you have, let's say, an approve button, that's great. We can actually make that approve button be unavailable unless you are actually an approver. Likewise with maybe a salary field, you have to have full control to be able to see the salary field, or something along those lines. So we can change the control status, we can set initial field values, calculated field values, and we can also do field validation as well. So we can easily work out if something is required, or it has to go within inside a certain range, or something. We can enter the expression and the validation text that will be rendered if the validation is not true. So there's just a few different calculations that we've performed on there. So I'm going to go to the Rich Forms tab and save and close that. Okay, and we'll see how brave I am. We could use the one that we've just done the calculations in, or I could go to my Blue Peter version. Let's be brave. So I'll go through and create the new item. Okay, so let's pick on a well-known company, Alfred's Futterkist from the Northwind database. Alfred can be the contact here. So we'll say he's an influencer, his phone number. Total order value is now uneditable, it's just read-only. I'll put in his email address. We didn't really change anything for the call, so I'm just going to jump down to the order. So we'll put in an order reference, we'll choose a product. Lightning forms, of course, we want to order 1,000 of those. Don't quote me on this, I'm just making numbers up. So we'll say it's $10 or £10, whatever it is per user. And sure enough, there's our total. And it's also provided me with the total spend for that customer already. And as we go through, this customer might also want to order Deliver Point, which is our permissions management tool. Although I made a typo on that, obviously. So we'll have 100 of those at 20 per user. So we get the grand total for that as well. And you can see how that's being rolled up to the main list. So very simple, no code at all. It's just expressions as users are used to doing. All right, so other things that we might want to do. The lookup is an issue here. So let's jump to the Blue Peter version for a moment. So I'm just going to go back into site contents, navigate into customers. Okay, and we'll just click onto new item. I'm not actually going to fill every field out, but just make you aware again of the problem under the address details. So under the address details, we've got this issue where we've got the country and the area, and we're displaying every single area, whether it's a county or a state. And that's assuming nobody else in the world exists. So I apologize to any European customers or Asian customers or anybody else who might be on the call. So what we're going to do is simply go through and customize that form again. So I'll go to the list ribbon, and let's go to the default new form. Okay, and just while this is loading, these are also lookups to another list. So I have a lookup from the country to a list just called countries, and that's just a list of countries. And I have another lookup to a list called areas, which is a list of countries and areas. So there's basically two columns in areas where I've got a list of all the countries and the areas, the states or the counties within inside those countries. So by choosing the area field, we're just going to select that, go to the behavior ribbon, and on the behavior ribbon we have this filter section. So under the filter section, I'm just going to click onto that filter icon, and in here we can start to add our filter. So I'm going to click on to add filter, and this is going to be straightforward. We're just going to say the area or the area field contains, and then I can say a number of different things. Form input, which just allows me to choose a field from the form, or we can have a value, so if I want to actually hard code the value, or we also have the expression, where I can use the expression builder to build the expression. So I'm actually going to do the same thing that I could have achieved by using the form field. But on here, if we expand country, I'm after the country value. Okay, so we'll save that and save that again. Okay, so we've got our query in there. So it's basically a camel query that's been built for us. And we'll save and close the form. Okay, so again, just to in the interest of time, I'm just going to go to the Blue Peter version, and we will create a new item. And I'm running out of customer names, so I'm just going to call this test, and let's pick on Sandy. Sorry, beg your pardon, I'm not in my Blue Peter version. Sorry, I must have misclicked. Okay, so we're going to jump into customers here, create a new item. So Sandy LLC, contact name is Sandy use here. We'll put in a phone and an email. Okay, and then we want to go to the address details. And on the address details, we can put in the address. So actually, she doesn't live anywhere. Country, well, at the moment, she's in the US, so we'll choose the US. And notice now we are just seeing states, not all the counties because of that query. So we can go through and choose California. There we go. Okay, so we've been able to easily create that cascading lookup as we go through and create that form. Another thing we might want to perform is some form of button. So let's just go through and have a look at the ability to create buttons. So we get the save and cancel button obviously in every single SharePoint list, and what we might want to do is extend that functionality to do something a little bit different. We could, with buttons, call a flow if we wanted to, if we're working in SharePoint Online. You can also call existing SharePoint workflows. You could populate a SharePoint list, you can send an email, you can save the form, you can send a notification out, a whole list of different things that you can perform using a Lightning Forms button. Okay, so on the Rich Forms tab, this is the default toolbar. What I'm going to do is just select that and get rid of it. So that's the one that we got out of the box with SharePoint. I could insert my own toolbar through here, or I can just drop a button on the form. And we offer the save and cancel button as well. So I could work with an existing button or create my own button with actions. So I'll actually just drop a save button on here, or two. Sorry, I think I must have triple clicked there. Okay, so let's go to, we'll select that button and we'll go to the behavior tab. And in here, we can see what that button that I've got selected is doing. So it's doing a save and then it's doing a redirection. But I can edit those actions, so we can see the save and the redirection that it's performing. So under the save form, I've got the title just so we can see what that action is doing. We could base that on a condition. Again, you've got the expression builder for the condition and the type. So the type of action. I'm going to add a new action to this. That's just telling me that this action can't come after the redirection, because the redirection is actually going to redirect us away from this form. So I'm just going to drag this new action above the redirection and give it a name. So one of the things we could do is actually email the customer. So if I just call that one email, hit the drop down and notice all the different actions that we can perform. So one of them is send mail. And I'll walk you through this one. I'm not actually going to do this one that sends email, but notice we could fill out the two required fields, the from and to, again with the expression builder. And those expressions, hopefully you're one step ahead of me. You can already see the sort of thing we can do here. We can go and get the context objects, get the current user, so that can be who the email is coming from. So we can go through and select that. Who the email is going to, well, that's going to be the customer's email, so we can go and grab that from the form. So in here we've got the email on the form that we can get. We've also got a carbon copy, a blind carbon copy, subject, and a body, again with the expression builder, so we can start to include fields that are on the form into the body of the email. Another thing that we can do is we could go through and add a list item. So if you wanted to track the activity that we're performing here, we could actually create an activity list. We could create a task list even. So when we actually go and schedule a call, we could actually make that a task that we want to create inside a task list. So if we choose add list item, we can choose whether the list is on this site or a different site. Choose the list that we want to work with. I don't actually have a task list here, but let's just choose another one. We could specify the content type, and you can type in hard-coded values, or again use the expression builder to populate those items. So you can track activity. Like I say, you could start a workflow. We can update a list item. We can upload a document. You can redirect to another URL. We can do a HTTP request. So again, if you wanted to integrate with Graph or anything like that, you could do so. And we can also do things like show messages and so on and so forth. So that's what I'm going to do just as a simple example, is show a message. So this will just be a success message. So we're doing a show message, and there's different types of message that I might want to perform, such as a dialogue, pop up a status, or a notification. So notification is just small in the top right hand corner. Status is if you're familiar with SharePoint Online and so on, you get this nice banner, different colors based on the type of status. So I want to show a success, which will be in green. If it was an error, it'd be in red. Amber would be warning, etc. So I'm going to make this a success message, and I can just type in the title here. Well done, you successfully saved a list item. And we could have a title for that as well, and so on. And how many seconds we want that to display for before it fades out. So we can add that to our list of actions behind that button. Okay, so again, let's just jump to finish this record, and you should see the notification. So in here we'll just create a quick call reference, so you can see it's populating the employee. Yeah, I logged in as a system account. We'll put in a date, time, description. Go Sandy. I want to follow that up today, and we'll put in an order. So we get that price calculated and so on. And here's my custom save and cancel button. So we'll hit save, and there's our success message at the top there, and then it redirects us back to the list. So so we're able to control the behavior behind the action buttons as well. And there's our Sandy LLC. So just also point out the integration with some of our other products that I mentioned as well. So on the page here, as we've been building these list items, I've actually got our Lightning Conductor, which is rolling up the list items that are being created. So there we can see Sandy LLC, Nomad in the United States with the phone number and so on, and the order value. So she's not quite ordered as much as Laura Rogers at IW Mentor, who spent 5,600 with us. And there's some conditional formatting showing that IW Mentor is our best customer. So that's going on inside that SharePoint list there. And if I change to another list, I've got the call list. So in my call list, highlighted in green is the people that I need to call today. So this is just simply done with our Lightning Conductor. Like I said, if we have a quick look at how that is being performed, I can click on to configure view. And this is just simply doing a SharePoint list rollup and adding that conditional formatting on that column. So I'll just jump to the columns tab. Again, if you're interested in the Lightning Conductor, there is a webinar that we did a few weeks back, or just before Christmas rather, which is on the webcast page as well. But in here is our conditional formatting. So notice there's the follow-up field, and if we just hit that conditional formatting icon, you can see here where it's applying that conditional formatting based on the follow-up date being equal to today. And also on the page we've got the chart web part. So that's an interactive chart, and that's looking at the orders as well and showing us how many products have been ordered from that list. The way that this integrates well, if I have a look at the Lightning Conductor, what I'm going to do is just click onto an item. So let's click onto Sandy to open up Sandy's item. That's probably don't know why that just did that. Just bear with me. Never mind, I must have uncustomized that form. So anyway, what I was hoping to show you was this. You can see this is opening up the dialog to view the item, and I can also click onto edit item and so on, start editing those fields. What I was expecting to see there, which was working just before. Oh, in fact, sorry, it's me being silly. I'm looking at the call list, not the customers. There we are. So click onto customer. I'm going to click onto Sandy LLC. And what we're going to see is the customized list. We're not going to see the default list. So this is the customized list that we built using Lightning Forms. So you get that same logic when you're aggregating content, and it doesn't matter where that item is. It could be in a completely different site or site collection, and we're still able to see this on the page. So the user's not losing the context of where they were. They're not having to navigate away or anything like that. Okay, so that's really a sort of high-level view of the sort of thing you could build using Lightning Forms. Obviously, you can get a lot more involved. You can actually add code if you want to, so you can build JavaScript functions and so on inside the form if that's required. But for most cases, you can get away with using just the expressions that I showed you. So what next? We're over the hour. So if you want more detailed, maybe tailored demonstration to an exact requirement that you've got, we'd be happy to do that. To arrange that, it's best to email sales@lightningtools.com. There's several people that will pick that up. If you know me, I tend not to be able to get to look at my email too often. So if you go to sales@lightningtools.com, they'll get in touch with me. We can set a demonstration exactly to your needs. If you want to just start playing with it, feel free to download a trial. So you can go to the URL here, or just use the QR code that's going to take you to the same place. You'll be able to download a trial of Lightning Forms. It's the same download for both SharePoint Online and also for SharePoint on premises. You must have SharePoint 2013 or 2016. It doesn't work with SharePoint 2010, I'm afraid. That's because it's a SharePoint add-in. So even if you are using SharePoint 2013 or 2016, make sure you do have the app catalog all configured and so on. If you don't, we'll be able to help you with that. Just reach out to support@lightningtools.com, and we can offer guidance on how you'll be able to get the app infrastructure all configured. So I'm going to open up for some questions as well. Again, if you don't want to ask a question here, feel free to email me, so brett@lightningtools.com, and also you can follow us on Twitter. Feel free to go and announce that you just saw a webinar on Lightning Forms. If you want to contain a link to the Lightning Forms as well, feel free to do that. So I'm going to open up for questions. Feel free to raise your hand again. So we do have a hand raised. Sorry, I just scrolled past it. Or did you put your hand back down again? There we go. Derek Jones. So Derek, you're unmuted. Hello, Derek. Okay, might be having mic problems. So Derek, I apologize, I couldn't hear you, but feel free to email in if you have a specific question. I'm not seeing any of the hands raised. So either nobody was listening to me or you can't think of any question. Stefan Schnepp, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So Stefan, you're unmuted.
So, hello, Brad.
Hi, how are you
Are
doing?
you hearing me?
Yes, I am.
I'm fine. I'm fine. Thank you.
Good, good.
Thanks for the demonstration. Was quite impressive to me. We're already using the Lightning Tools Conductor,
Okay, great.
and yeah, in my experience from the past, most of my colleagues are yeah, not really able to configure the conductor. It's more or less the key users and the power users which can do that. And I think the forms, it's quite similar because it's really intuitive, but more or less to the power users. What's your opinion about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically, what we tend to develop as a company is something that the power user can develop easily, end users can use. So yeah, obviously with training, we'd be able to get end users to build their own forms and content aggregation as well using the Lightning Conductor, but it is aimed at that power user, but not really developer, if that makes sense. So obviously a developer
Yeah.
might open up Visual Studio and start building some solutions, but that's time consuming and expensive for a lot of organizations. Whereas if
Yeah.
you're a power user, you can build a solution for your team easily using the products that we offer. And all of our products come with training as an option as well. So we offer half-day training courses to get you up to speed, and that can be up to 100 attendees at a time. So you know, if it was something that you wanted to put end users through, that would also be possible.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, of course. It's just your opinion I'm interested in because, as I said, we have a few users. Of course, our developers and our administrators are able to use all this, and some key users and power users as well. But yeah, the majority not really. So we're doing the work for them, so they can use it and get the nice view of that.
Exactly. Okay, yeah, that's as
Yeah.
it's intended. So that's great. Thank you. Excellent. Okay, I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm going to thank everybody for attending. I hope you found the webinar useful. It was recorded. It will be up on our site by tomorrow morning. So if you go to lightningtools.com and click onto webcasts, you'll see the recording there. If you want to go there now, you'll also see some previous webcasts as well. And like I say, make a note of the download and the email address if you want to arrange a more detailed demonstration. But thank you everybody for attending. I hope you have a great rest of the day and speak to you soon.